God's desire down in verse 22 is for some to obey is better than to sacrifice. That's what we just looked at. To obey is better than sacrifice. Now, what's interesting down in verse 15, verse 29, here's a beautiful verse. It says, "For he who is the glory of Israel does not lie or change his mind." The glory of Israel does not lie or change his mind. For he is not a man that he should change his mind. Does anybody remember, but you said, wait a minute, didn't you say God can change his mind and things? How does this work? And I guess I go back to the thing, can God change his character, or is his character firm? His character doesn't change. When God gives his word, does God keep his word? God is a promise keeper. Is God able to, how should I say things in the future that never happen? And is God able to change his mind? I'm going to destroy them. I'm going to destroy them. Moses prays, and then God spares them. Okay, so be careful. It doesn't mean God can't, think. By the way, does thinking mean change? God thinks and stuff, so be careful. It's his character doesn't change, his word doesn't change. You got to be careful about mapping that into universal. Now, we finally break in. David, okay? So here comes David. Now, Saul is said to be history. In 1 Samuel chapter 15, Saul goes down, and now we know there's going to be a new guy. But what happens in chapter 16? This first verse, chapter 16, has got a problem. It says, "The Lord said to Samuel, 'How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil.'" Now, when a prophet fills his horn with oil, what does he do with oil? What does a prophet do with oil? He anoints people. And who does he anoint usually, very often? The king, okay? So he's got a horn of oil. He's going to anoint something. He's going to anoint the next king. So he says, okay, fill your horn with oil, olive oil, and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. So David's going to be from the town of Bethlehem. Beit Lechem, Beit means house of, Lechem means bread. So Bethlehem means house of bread. This is where David's home was. And who's the other real famous person from Bethlehem? Jesus is going to be born there. It's the city of David, where David was born. I am sending you to Jesse, to Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king. Then Samuel says, how can I go? Saul will hear about it and kill me. The Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord, and invite Jesse to the sacrifice. Question. Was that heifer taken purposely to deceive Saul? Was the heifer taken purposely to deceive Saul? He's got a horn of oil. Why is he going down to Bethlehem? He's going to anoint the next king. God says, take a heifer and tell Saul you're going down to sacrifice. Is that heifer purposely meant to deceive Saul so that Saul doesn't kill Samuel? By the way, would Saul kill Samuel? Question. Would Saul kill his own son? Later on, would Saul try to kill David repeatedly? Would Saul kill Samuel? Of course he would have. Okay, God says take a heifer. Now this story should remind you of two other stories that we've already had in the Old Testament. Okay, who's involved here? Who sets up this deception? Does God himself set it up? He says, take a heifer. Tell him you're going down there to sacrifice. Okay, so God's involved in this one. Now, where are two other stories where this has happened? We've seen this twice before. Does anybody remember that? Yeah. Remember the Hebrew midwives? Remember the Hebrew midwives in Exodus, the early chapters in Exodus there? Oh, the Jewish women have their children before we get there because they're not like the Egyptian women, when they have their babies and stuff. So the Hebrew midwives lied to basically cover that. By the way, did God allow the Hebrew midwives to go with the Jews and become part of Israel? Yes. Does anybody remember the other story where that said where there was a deception used and then God approved of it? Yeah, who said that? Rahab. Rahab the harlot. Remember? The king's men come and she says, oh, they were here, but they left. They went that way. You better go real fast to catch them. And she was hiding them up there. And then Rahab was what? Rahab was accepted into Israel. Remember the red cord and things in the window? And then Rahab and her family was spared. And actually Rahab appears in whose genealogy, by the way? Rahab the harlot is in Jesus Christ's genealogy. So what I tried to suggest earlier was that this kind of deception, I want to move it out of the category of evil and put it into the term of shrewdness. When you're dealing with evil, do you have to be shrewd? Let me put it in a different way. The Hebrew word for shrewdness is the word arum. Arum is also translated wisdom. Wisdom. Okay? So the word that's translated, depending on translation, sometimes translated shrewd, is actually the word in Proverbs and other places used for wisdom. When you're dealing with evil, do you have to be wise? Do you have to be shrewd? By the way, this isn't just me making this up. Jesus says what? Jesus said what? Be what as serpents? Be wise or as shrewd as serpents. Be as wise as serpents and what? And harmless as doves, as innocent as doves, okay? So be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And I think what you've got here is that God is being shrewd because he knew Saul would kill him. So he's saying, okay, we've got to outfox him. We've got to outfox him. And they did. Okay, so anyways, some people get bent out of shape, but I don't think it's a big issue, actually, to be honest with you. I don't think it's like that now. God says in chapter 16, verse 7, beautiful verse, but the Lord said to Samuel, Samuel is anointing Jesse's sons. And who does Jesse bring out but his firstborn? Here's my firstborn. And God says, no, I don't want his firstborn. His secondborn, his thirdborn. He brings out all his sons, and finally it's like, hey, I ain't got any sons left, man. Where are these people? And he says, oh yeah, there's the young guy. He's out, the baby of the family. He's out watching the sheep. Bring him in. But the Lord said to Samuel, chapter 16, verse 7, do not consider his appearance or his height. Now, in Saul's case, did they consider his height? Yeah. Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at things man looks at. Man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. It's no joke. I heard somebody take this passage once and say to young women this. Man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. But man does look at the outward appearance, so honey, you better take care. I'm dead serious. I heard somebody say that. I just about croaked. Is that totally against everything this verse is? Is that the whole point of this verse, just the opposite of that? Does God care about the heart? Okay? And so, do people take the Bible and twist the Bible? And this is one of those cases. I'll just never forget it. It was like one of the dumbest things I think I've ever heard of. To tell somebody that based on this passage, it was just really, I don't know. The point of this passage is God looks at the heart. Question, does that give us a clue about David? Is David going to be the man after God's own heart? David is going to be the man after God's own heart. By the way, does that mean David's perfect? Is David going to have his problems? He's going to have his problems too, but notice he's a man after God's own heart. And so that sets up David then, so we know his heart and that kind of thing.